Daddy, I missed my flight. Can I land with you? Sweetheart, you can't just. Security, please. This moment was different from every airport mix-up because if the girl was turned away now, she would spend the night alone in a locked terminal, with no phone, no ticket, and no one left who would come for her. The words hung between them as the terminal's final boarding chime faded into silence. The overhead lights dimmed to their nighttime glow. A floor buffer hummed somewhere far down the concourse, slow and lonely, like a tired animal circling the same spot. The girl couldn't have been more than 8. Small backpack. Pink sneakers with one loose lace. Her braids were neat but slightly frayed at the ends, like someone had tried very hard this morning. She held a crumpled boarding pass with both hands, as if it might disappear if she loosened her grip. The man she called Daddy was not her father. He was standing behind the rope line reserved for airline executives and emergency staff, his tailored coat still on, briefcase at his feet. Thomas Hale, owner of Hilway Airlines, had not been called Daddy by anyone in over 30 years. He looked down at her, startled more by the word than the situation. People always called him Sir, or Mr. Hale, or nothing at all, when they were afraid. I'm not your, he began, then stopped. Because she was not crying. Her eyes were dry. Her face was calm in a way children only get when they have already cried too much earlier. She wasn't asking loudly. She wasn't begging. She was simply standing there, as if the answer had already been decided, and she was just checking to see if it was still true. A uniformed supervisor shifted uncomfortably beside him. Sir, policy says unaccompanied minors can't stay overnight unless. I know the policy, Thomas Hale said. His voice came out colder than he intended. The girl looked up again. The lady at the desk said my plane broke, she said. My auntie is in Atlanta. My mama is busy. Busy. The word landed heavy. Thomas glanced toward the dark windows. Snow pressed against the glass. Flights were grounded. Hotels were full. He knew all of this. He had approved the cancellations himself an hour earlier, from a quiet office with a warm cup of coffee. He also knew the policy allowed no exceptions. Not for weather. Not for sympathy. Not even for children. The supervisor cleared his throat. Sir, what should we do with her? Thomas Hale looked back down at the girl, at the way her fingers tightened around that useless piece of paper. For the first time in years, he felt something crack behind his ribs. If this moment feels wrong to you, stay with me. Enjoying this story? Subscribe for the next one. Thomas Hale did not answer right away. He watched the girl's shoes instead of her face. One lace dragged on the floor, already darkened by slush and dirt. He noticed things like that. Small details. They were safer than feelings. What's your name? He asked. Amara, she said. Amara Lewis. The supervisor checked his tablet. No Guardian pickup listed, sir. She was supposed to transfer through Chicago. Missed connection due to weather. Thomas nodded once. And no emergency contact? Just the aunt in Atlanta. Phone goes straight to voicemail. Amara shifted her backpack higher on her shoulders. I don't need a bed, she added quickly. I can sit. I'm good at sitting. That did it. Not the words themselves, but the speed. The way she'd learned to offer less before anyone asked her to. Thomas turned away, rubbing his jaw. The terminal smelled like coffee that had been burned hours ago. Like metal and cold air. This place usually felt controlled to him. Predictable. Tonight it felt hollow. Sir, the supervisor said gently, we can contact airport services. They'll place her in temporary care until morning. Temporary care. Another clean phrase. Thomas knew what that meant too. A room with bright lights. A tired worker. A thin blanket. Paperwork that would take hours. He looked back at Amara. Where's your father? He asked carefully. She hesitated. Just a beat too long. He's gone, she said. My mama says he watches planes now. Thomas swallowed. The supervisor's radio crackled. Final sweep in 15 minutes, a voice said. Terminal be closing. 15 minutes. That was all the time policy allowed before the building officially locked down. Thomas straightened his coat. I'll handle this, he said. The supervisor blinked. Sir? I said I'll handle it. There was something in his tone that ended discussions. The supervisor nodded and stepped back, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. Thomas crouched so he was level with Amara. His knees protested. He ignored them. Amara, he said, I can't let you stay here alone. But I also can't promise what you're asking. She nodded, serious. I know. Then why ask? She thought about that. Because sometimes grown-ups forget kids are people, she said. I remind them. That crack inside his chest widened. Thomas stood slowly. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts he never used. Old names? Old favors. He hesitated, thumb hovering. This would be noticed. Anything he did now would be logged, reviewed, questioned. He had built his company on rules. On never bending first. The radio crackled again. 10 minutes. Amara sat down on her backpack without being told. Folded her hands. Waited. Thomas made a call. It rang once. Twice. Someone answered. Yes, Thomas said quietly. This is Hale. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me no if the answer is no. He listened. His face did not change. Amara watched him closely, reading his silence like a story. When he hung up, he exhaled slowly. Come with me, he said. Where? She asked. Somewhere warmer, he replied. She stood. And for the first time since she'd spoken, she smiled, just a little. What would you have done, standing there with the clock ticking and a rulebook in your hand? They walked past the darkened gates, their footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty terminal. Amara stayed close to Thomas's side, matching his pace without trying. She didn't ask questions. Children who asked too many questions learn disappointment early. A security officer nodded as they passed. Evening, Mr. Hale. Evening, Thomas replied, steady. Behind a frosted glass door marked authorized personnel only, the airport felt different. Quieter. Warmer. The hum of machines replaced the hollow silence of the public concourse. This way, Thomas said. They entered a small executive lounge. The lights flicked on automatically, revealing leather chairs, a low table, and a window overlooking the snow-covered runway. Coffee cups sat untouched, their surfaces filmed over. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Amara's eyes widened, just enough to notice. You can sit, Thomas said. She chose the chair closest to the window. Pressed her hands against the glass. The planes look like they're sleeping, she whispered. Yes, Thomas said. They do. He removed his coat and draped it over the back of a chair. For a moment, he stood there unsure what came next. He was used to solving problems with memos and meetings, not children and midnight snowstorms. Are you really the boss of the planes? Amara asked. I suppose I am, he said. Do you fly them? No. Then how do you know where they go? The question caught him off guard. He almost laughed. Almost. I trust the people who do, he said finally. She nodded, considering that. A knock sounded at the door. The supervisor stepped in, holding a clipboard. Sir, I need to document that she's under your responsibility for the night. I understand. The supervisor glanced at Amara. You hungry, sweetheart? She looked at Thomas before answering. He nodded. Yes, she said. A little. The supervisor smiled. I'll see what we have. When the door closed again, Thomas checked his watch. Past midnight. Your aunt, he said. We'll keep trying to reach her. I know, Amara said. She works nights. Another silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. Thomas noticed a small tear in Amara's backpack strap, tied together with a neat knot. He wondered who had tied it. A mother. A neighbor. Someone who cared enough to fix instead of replace. You called me Daddy, he said gently. She looked down. I'm sorry. You don't need to be. My real daddy used to work at an airport, she said. He said planes listen if you talk to them nice. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he saw not the lounge, but another terminal, decades ago. Smaller. Louder. A boy sitting alone while his mother argued at a counter. A man in a uniform walking past without looking down. He hadn't thought about that night in years. The supervisor returned with a paper bag. Sandwich. Juice. Apple slices? Eat, Thomas said. Amara did, slowly, politely. Her phone buzzed once. She checked it, then set it down again. No message? Thomas asked. She shook her head. Outside, snow thickened, swallowing the runway lights one by one. Thomas's phone vibrated in his pocket. A new email notification. Subject line, Policy Compliance Review. He didn't open it. Because for the first time, the rules felt optional. And that thought scared him more than the storm. Have you ever followed a rule so long you forgot why it was written? At 1:17 a.m., Thomas Hale's phone rang. He knew who it would be before he answered. Yes, he said. The voice on the other end was calm, trained that way. Mr. Hale, this is airport operations. We've been notified an unaccompanied minor is currently housed in an executive area. Thomas glanced at Amara. She was tracing circles on the fogged window with one finger, humming softly. That's correct, he said. Sir, protocol requires transfer to child services within 30 minutes. I'm aware of the protocol. There was a pause. Then may I ask why it hasn't been followed? Thomas looked down at his shoes. Polished. Expensive. Completely out of place on this carpet tonight. Because the protocol didn't account for a storm like this, he said. Or a child with nowhere to go. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll need to escalate this, the voice said. I expected that. The call ended. Thomas set the phone down carefully, as if a sudden movement might break something fragile. Amara, he said. Someone might come talk to us soon. Am I in trouble? She asked. No, he said quickly. You are not. She nodded. Okay. That was all. No tears. No questions. She trusted him. And that trust felt heavier than any legal consequence. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. 2 sets this time. A woman in a navy coat entered with a man carrying a tablet. Both wore the kind of polite concern that came from training, not instinct. Mr. Hale, the woman said. I'm Karen Wells, airport duty manager. Good evening, Thomas replied. Her eyes softened when she saw Amara. Hello, sweetheart. Hi, Amara said. Karen crouched. Do you know where you're staying tonight? Amara looked at Thomas. Karen straightened. Sir, we appreciate your concern. But exceptions like this create risk. Thomas met her gaze. So does leaving a child alone. The man with the tablet cleared his throat. There's also the issue of liability. Thomas smiled faintly. There always is. Karen sighed. We're not heartless, Mr. Hale. But if word gets out. It will, Thomas said. Eventually. Silence. Karen studied him more closely now. Not the owner. The man. You're serious about this, she said. Yes. And if corporate review disagrees? Then I'll answer for it. Amara swung her legs gently, pretending not to listen. But her shoulders were tight. Karen closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. We can delay transfer until morning, she said. Under one condition. Thomas waited. You stay with her. Personally. I will. No assistance. No handoffs. I understand. Karen nodded. I'll document it as executive supervision due to extraordinary circumstances. The man typed quickly. Karen turned to Amara. You okay staying here tonight? Amara smiled. It's warm. And the planes are nice. Karen smiled back. They are. When they left, Thomas sat down heavily. You didn't have to do that, Amara said quietly. Yes, he said. I did. He looked at her. Really looked. She was not just a child who missed a flight. She was a test. Of the company he'd built. Of the man he'd become. And whether either still remembered what people were for. Outside, one runway light flickered back on through the snow. What do you do when the safest choice is also the hardest one? The night stretched thin, like it was afraid to move. Thomas sat across from Amara, a small table between them. A clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second sounding like a decision being counted. Amara yawned and covered her mouth. I'm not tired, she said, even as her eyes watered. Of course not, Thomas replied. He poured water into a paper cup and slid it toward her. She drank carefully, both hands wrapped around it. Mr. Hale? She asked. Yes? Do you have kids? The question landed gently, but it landed all the same. I had a son, he said. Her eyes lifted. Had? Thomas nodded. A long time ago. She waited. Didn't push. He would be about your age now, Thomas added, surprising himself. Maybe a little older. What was his name? Daniel. Amara smiled. That's a strong name. Yes, Thomas said. It was. The clock ticked on. Where is he? She asked softly. Thomas looked toward the runway. Snow still fell, but lighter now, like it was getting tired too. He died, Thomas said. Oh, Amara whispered. He expected questions. He expected tears. Instead, she slid her apple slices toward him. You can have mine, she said. When my mama is sad, she forgets to eat. Something in his chest loosened, then tightened again. Thank you, he said, and meant it more than she could know. A notification buzzed on Thomas's phone. He ignored it. Another buzz. Then another. He glanced down. Internal messages. Operations. Legal. Communications. Someone had noticed. He stood and walked a few steps away, lowering his voice. This is Hale. Yes, I know. No, I haven't changed my mind. Because she's 8. He ended the call before the other person finished speaking. When he turned back, Amara was standing by the window again. Is Daniel up there? She asked, pointing toward the sky. Thomas swallowed. I like to think so. She nodded. Then he can see you being nice. He laughed once quietly. I hope so. A knock interrupted them. The supervisor returned, looking uneasy. Sir, there's a development. Thomas stiffened. What kind? A woman just arrived. She says she knows the child. Amara turned. Her face went pale. Auntie? She asked. The supervisor hesitated. She didn't say she was family. She said she works with your mother. Amara's hands curled into fists. My mama didn't send anyone, she said. Thomas felt the room shift. Where is this woman now? He asked. Security office. Thomas picked up his coat. Stay here, he told Amara. I'll be right back. She nodded, but her eyes followed him to the door, wide and worried. As Thomas stepped into the hallway, he felt the old instincts rise. The ones that had kept him alive in boardrooms and courtrooms. Someone was trying to take control of this situation. And he needed to know why. Who shows up in the middle of the night, claiming a child that isn't theirs? The security office smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. Thomas stepped inside and immediately felt the tension. 2 officers stood near the wall. A woman sat at the metal table, her coat still on, purse clutched tightly in her lap. She stood when she saw him. Thank God, she said. You must be in charge. I am, Thomas replied. Who are you? My name is Rochelle Benton, the woman said. I work with the child's mother. Community outreach. After-school programs. Why are you here? Thomas asked. Rochelle swallowed. Her mother asked me to come. There was an emergency. What emergency? She didn't explain. Just said Amara was alone and needed an adult. Thomas studied her face. Well-dressed. Careful makeup. Nervous, but not frantic. Did she give you identification? He asked. Yes, Rochelle said quickly. I have messages. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly, and turned the screen toward him. Texts. A woman's name. A request to help. No details. Thomas frowned. You understand why I can't release her to you? I do, Rochelle said. But I'm not a stranger. I've known Amara for years. Then you'll understand verification, Thomas said. He turned to the officers. Has anyone spoken to the mother directly? Voicemail only, one officer replied. Phone's still off. Rochelle's voice rose. Please. That little girl has been through enough tonight. Thomas looked at her sharply. So has every child who's been handed to the wrong person. Silence fell. Rochelle's shoulders slumped. I'm just trying to help. Thomas softened his tone, but not his stance. Then help by waiting. She sat back down, lips pressed tight. Thomas stepped out into the hallway and made another call. A private number this time. One he rarely used. Yes, he said when it connected. I need background verification. Quietly. He gave the name. While he waited, he returned to the lounge. Amara was exactly where he'd left her, feet tucked under her, eyes fixed on the door. She's here, isn't she? Amara asked. Someone says she knows you, Thomas replied carefully. Amara shook her head. She knows my mama. Not me. How do you know? Because if she knew me, Amara said, she'd know I don't like strangers holding my hand. Thomas's phone vibrated. A message appeared. Rochelle Benton. No criminal history. But flagged once in a custody-related dispute. Not parent. No legal authority. Thomas closed his eyes. He knelt in front of Amara. You did the right thing, he said. I know, she replied. He stood and walked back toward the security office, his steps steady now. Rochelle looked up hopefully when he entered. I'm sorry, Thomas said. You can't take her. Her face hardened. Then what happens to her? She stays, Thomas said. With me. Until her family is confirmed. Rochelle scoffed. You think a rich airline owner is safer than someone who actually knows her community? Thomas met her gaze. Tonight, yes. Security stepped forward. As Rochelle was escorted out, she turned back once. This isn't over, she said. The door closed. Thomas exhaled slowly. Back in the lounge, Amara watched him carefully. You look tired, she said. So do you, he replied. Outside, the snow finally began to stop. But Thomas knew something else had just started. When someone challenges your right to protect a child, how far would you be willing to go? Morning crept in quietly, as if it didn't want to disturb them. The snow had stopped some time before dawn. Pale lights slid across the runway, turning the world gray and gentle. Thomas hadn't slept. Neither had Amara, though she'd rested with her head against the arm of the chair, her backpack hugged to her chest. At 6:12 a.m., Thomas's phone rang again. This time, he answered immediately. Yes. The voice was different. Older. Tired. Mr. Hale, this is Child Services. We've been briefed on the situation. I assumed you would be, Thomas said. We've made contact with the child's mother. The voice continued. There are complications. Thomas felt his spine stiffen. Explain. She was detained overnight, the woman said carefully. Minor charge. She'll be released later today. Amara stirred. Does she know where her daughter is? Thomas asked. Yes. She's aware Amara missed her flight. She assumed airline staff would handle it. Thomas closed his eyes. Assumed. There's more, the woman added. This is not the first time Amara has been left in transit. Thomas opened his eyes slowly. How many times? A few, the woman said. Enough that her name triggered a review. That crack inside his chest finally broke open. Amara sat up. Is my mama okay? She asked. She will be, Thomas said gently. The voice on the phone continued. Mr. Hale, given your involvement, will need a formal statement. Possibly media inquiries. Your company. My company can wait, Thomas said. What does Amara need? There was a pause. She needs stability, the woman said. And someone willing to advocate. Thomas looked at the girl in front of him. At the calm way she waited. At how used she was to adults deciding her life from far away. I will, he said. Another pause. Softer now. We'll note that. The call ended. Amara picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Am I going somewhere else? She asked. Eventually, Thomas said honestly. But not before people listen. She nodded. Okay. Breakfast arrived from a nearby cafe. Pancakes. Eggs. Warm food. Amara ate slowly, savoring each bite. Mr. Hale? She asked between bites. Yes? Are you in trouble? Thomas smiled faintly. Probably. Because of me? Because of choices, he corrected. She thought about that. My teacher says choices show who you are. That's a good teacher, Thomas said. At 8:03 a.m., Thomas's assistant arrived, eyes wide, phone already in hand. Sir, social media is asking questions. Someone posted about a child sleeping at the airport. They didn't name you, but... I know, Thomas said. Prepare a statement. Simple. Honest. Yes, sir. He looked back at Amara. You ready? For what? For people to notice, he said. She shrugged. They always do. Just late. As the sun fully rose, Thomas realized this was no longer about one missed flight. It was about a system that had quietly learned to look away. And a little girl who refused to disappear into it. When the truth finally comes into the light, who stands with you, and who steps back? By mid-morning, the airport was awake again. Travelers moved through the terminal with coffee cups and rolling bags, unaware of the quiet storm that had already passed through the executive lounge. Thomas stood near the window as two representatives from Child Services spoke softly with Amara at the table. They were kind, careful, trained. Amara answered their questions clearly. No embellishment. No fear. Yes, I missed my flight. Yes, Mr. Hale stayed. Yes, I felt safe. Those last words echoed longer than anything else she said. Thomas's assistant returned, face tight. Sir, legal wants to remind you that personal involvement creates exposure. Noted, Thomas replied. And the board is split, she added. Some support you. Others are concerned. Thomas nodded. They should be. A woman from Child Services approached him. We'll be placing Amara in temporary foster care while her mother's situation is reviewed. Temporary again. May I ask where? Thomas said. With a licensed family. Nearby. And visitation? Limited, the woman said. At first. Thomas looked back at Amara. She was swinging her legs, listening closely without appearing to. When will I see my mama? Amara asked. Soon, the woman said. We promise. Amara nodded, accepting the word without trusting it. Thomas felt something rise in him. Not anger. Resolve. There will be oversight, he said. From my office. The woman hesitated. Then nodded. That would be helpful. News alerts began lighting up phones across the lounge. Headlines forming. Speculation growing. A child. A storm. An airline owner's choice. Thomas released a statement just before noon. No defense. No excuses. Just facts. He stayed because she needed someone. He would do it again. The response was immediate. Some praised him. Some accused him. Some asked why it took a billionaire's attention for a child to be safe overnight. That question stayed with him. Amara stood and walked over, holding her backpack. I have to go now, she said. Yes, Thomas replied. She hesitated, then reached out and hugged him around the waist. Quick. Fierce. Real. Thank you for landing with me, she said. His breath caught. Anytime. As she walked away with the caseworker, she turned once more and waved. Thomas raised his hand. When she disappeared around the corner, the lounge felt emptier than it had all night. His assistant cleared her throat. Sir, what happens next? Thomas looked out at the busy terminal. At the children walking with parents who didn't even notice how close they were to losing them. We make sure this doesn't end here, he said. Because one child had asked a simple question, and the answer had exposed 100 quiet failures. What responsibility do we carry after the moment everyone stops watching? 3 weeks later, the snow was gone. Thomas Hale stood in a modest conference room, far from glass walls and private lounges. The table was scratched. The chairs didn't match. Coffee was served in foam cups. This room was intentional. Across from him sat representatives from Child Services, 2 board members, and a woman with tired eyes and a trembling grip on her purse. Amara's mother. She looked smaller than Thomas expected. Not careless. Not cruel. Just worn thin by years that never paused. I never meant to leave her like that, the woman said quietly. I thought someone would help. Thomas nodded. Someone should have. So should we. The caseworker slid a folder across the table. We're recommending reunification with conditions. Parenting support. Travel restrictions until stability improves. Amara's mother pressed her lips together and nodded. I'll do anything. Thomas leaned forward. There's also something I want to propose. All eyes turned to him. Billionaire Airlines will fund a new unaccompanied minor oversight program, he said. Independent review. Mandatory human check-ins. No child left overnight without a named adult physically present. One board member shifted. That's extensive. So is the cost of pretending this never happens, Thomas replied. Silence followed. Then the caseworker spoke. This would change how airports handle thousands of children. That's the idea, Thomas said. Amara's mother looked up, eyes wet. Why are you doing this? Thomas thought of a boy in an old terminal. Of a uniformed man who never looked down. Because someone once didn't, he said. Later that afternoon, Thomas waited in a family room painted with fading murals. The door opened. Amara stepped in, holding her mother's hand. She broke free the moment she saw him and ran forward. Mr. Hale! He knelt and opened his arms. She hugged him hard. You kept your promise, she said. So did you, he replied. Her mother stood back, unsure. Thomas rose. She's a remarkable child, he said. I know, her mother replied, voice breaking. Amara looked between them. Guess what? What? Thomas asked. I'm not scared of airports anymore, she said. But I'll always remember the one with the sleeping planes. Thomas smiled. As they left together, Thomas stayed behind for a moment, listening to their footsteps fade. This time, the room didn't feel empty. It felt finished. Sometimes, change doesn't come from anger or force. It comes from staying when it would be easier to leave. What quiet change might start with one decision you make today? 1 year later, Terminal B looked different. Not on the surface. The same gates. The same announcements echoing overhead. The same hurried footsteps and rolling suitcases. But in a small office near security, a light stayed on overnight now. There was always a person inside. Thomas Hale stood outside the glass, watching as a staff member knelt to speak with a young boy clutching a stuffed dog. The boy nodded, listening carefully. Not rushed. Not dismissed. Across the country, similar rooms now existed in every railway hub. Not branded. Not advertised. Just present. The policy had a long name. Committees had debated it for months. Lawyers had trimmed its language. But staff called it something simpler. The Amara Rule. Thomas never corrected them. He still received letters. From parents. From flight attendants. From grown adults who wrote about nights they'd once spent alone in public places, wishing someone had stayed. He read every one. Once a month, Thomas visited a community center on the south side of the city. No cameras. No press. Just folding chairs and donated snacks. Amara was usually there, doing homework at a long table. She'd look up when he entered and smile, that same small, steady smile. "Hi, Mr. Hale," she'd say. "Hello, traveler," he'd reply. She still wanted to be a pilot. Planes still listened, she insisted. And Thomas Hale, who had once built an empire on efficiency and distance, now measured success differently. Not by on-time departures, but by who stayed behind when everything stopped. Some stories don't end at the gate. They land quietly, and change the ground beneath us. Yendi, thanks for watching. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when you were small, or a time when someone chose to stay instead of walk away. If something here moved you, let it out, share the feeling, the memory, the thought it stirred. And if you'd like to keep traveling through stories that lead with heart, stay close. There are more waiting.